You're listening to the Wanderlusting Wives podcast, your podcast for escaping life's monotony, indulging in your wildest travel fantasies, and discovering the constant beauty of this ever-changing world.
On today's episode, we are joined by Dianni Hall from While She's Away podcast as she shares stories of adventure and love from her life as a digital nomad.
Welcome to the Wanderlusting Wives podcast. We're your navigators, Allison
And Regan. And today we have another guest for our Travel Tuesday. Happy Travel Tuesday, by the way. We have Dianni Hall here with us, and she has a wonderful podcast of her own that I'm going to let her plug away because you all should go hop over and listen to it right after you get done with this one. But first, before we get into that conversation, just a couple of reminders. As always, we have our new website. Go check us out, www.wanderlustingwives.com. Again, there's more about us, past episodes, opportunities to connect with us, and we'd love for you to reach out and connect with us so that we can hear your stories, and maybe if you want to be a guest on our podcast too. Allie, what's going on social media?
Yeah, so we are continuing to have our giveaway, so make sure you check that out. Lots of fun travel stuff. Remember, we're trying to hit 200 followers, and then we will be picking a winner. So check us out on Instagram at Wanderlusting Wives, Facebook, Wanderlusting Wives Podcast, Twitter, Wanderlust Wives, and then, as always, feel free to email us at wanderlustingwives@gmail.com.
Awesome. Yeah, we're really excited. We've been gaining some traction, which is awesome. Thank you to everyone who has already reached out or been a part of that. But yeah, we'll continue rolling along until we get to 200. But for today, as we said, we have Dianni Hall with us here. Welcome, Dianni.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm excited to be here.
Yay.
We're so excited to have you. Yeah, we're stoked.
Yeah. So we were hoping that you could just kind of start us off, like, tell us about you, like, tell us about your podcast. Just, yeah, give us your story.
First of all, the podcast, it's called While She's Away, and it's a podcast where I interview other women and occasionally do solo episodes as well, just about travel, women. I interview different women on their travel expertise and experiences, and they give advice on everything from solo travel to like extreme budget travel to digital nomad life, freelancing, and kind of everything in between. And it's just a space for women to kind of learn how to travel full time or travel as much as they want to in general and kind of live their best lives traveling around the world. I know we touched on a bit beforehand, like a few of the guests that I have on kind of go through how to make that life a reality and how we're just like I want to live that life, but it's possible to do. So if you need some resources, it's a great podcast to listen to. A little bit about me. I am currently a full-time traveler. I have been nomadic for the past 4 years almost now, traveling and living in different places around the world, occasionally going home to save money. Until now, I do freelance work, what I've been working on that over the past few months so that I can travel and work remotely at the same time. And then my next adventure is going to be in Mexico. So I'm going to do Central and South America for like a total of a year, 2 years. And my most recent adventure was through Europe for 6 months.
That's awesome. Where can we find your podcast, and what are your social media handles so our listeners can follow you?
Awesome. Yeah. So you can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, basically anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then on social media, I'm a lot more interesting on TikTok than anywhere else. So you can find me on TikTok at While She's Away, and then on Instagram at While She's Away Pod.
Active on TikTok. That is one thing we are not. So I'm going to have to like live through your TikTok page.
TikTok is my favorite platform to be active on because it just feels very like low stakes. Everyone's just doing whatever they want and you can kind of be ridiculous and yourself, and it's totally accepted there. So I love TikTok.
I'm really interested. So I know we're going to like kind of just see where this conversation goes, tell some stories maybe. I'm interested, actually, one question that comes up for me is like when you decide where you're going, for this nomadic travel lifestyle, like, what is that process like? What goes through your head? How do you plan for that? What do you love about it?
I love the freedom aspect of it, so it's kind of like wherever it is that I wanna go. I think so my very first trip that I did solo, I did from New Jersey. I'm originally from New Jersey, and I had never done a solo trip before, ever, and I decided to get on a plane to India for my first solo trip. And then I ended up doing 4 months through Southeast Asia for that whole trip. And originally, I was supposed to do a backpacking trip in South America with an ex partner, and that didn't work out. And then I found a workaway that I wanted to do in India, and that's why I ended up going there. But it was very just like, oh, I found this place I wanted to go to. Okay, I'm going to plan a whole trip around it. What's near it? Okay, I can go to Thailand and I can go to Vietnam and I can go to Laos. And it turned into a whole trip that way. And then when I moved back to the States and I was working for a bit, deciding where I was going to go next, I had applied to an English teaching assistant program. So then I decided to move to Spain, even though I had never been to Europe before. And Spain was like a almost a year adventure, living in different places, doing different things. And then I came back again, and the next time I decided to choose, I chose Europe because while I was in Spain, I didn't get to explore any other parts of Europe besides Spain due to COVID. There were still a lot of restrictions and things, and so I wanted to see more of Europe. And then when I went back, I did like 10 different countries, kind of moving around a lot. And choosing this trip coming up during doing Mexico into the rest of Central America into South America, um, it was what my original trip was supposed to be like 4 years ago, and it's just been kind of getting pushed back. And I'm very much the type of person that wants to be in all the places at once because I want to see everything. But this one's really been on my list for a really long time, and so it feels like now that I've got my life situated in a way that I can work and travel at the same time, it feels like a good moment in time to do this. But there's not really any like systematic way that I choose places. It's kind of just been like, this is where I want to go, and so this is where I'm going to go, or I find a cheap flight, or I just feel called to go there, and I've ended up there. So that's usually how it's worked out.
So cool. So with all of these travels, what kind there have to be so many stories. I would love to hear some stories that you have from throughout your travels and your travel lifestyle. Honestly, you've made it a lifestyle.
No, fully made it a lifestyle. I think from that first trip that I took, it was that first time that I was like, this is going to be it. This is my life for now on, and I was just really set on figuring out how I could make it as long term as possible. And that's what I've done and have been doing over the past few years. Um but in terms of stories, I do have a few favorites. I think my first favorite is when I was in India, the place that I had found that I really wanted to go to. It was a workaway at an ashram, which is like an all female kind of spiritual center. And the whole gist or vibe of it was that you were waking up at like 5 a.m. to meditate every morning for an hour and to do yoga for an hour. And you were doing chores and you couldn't have your phone. And it was all supposed to be like very intentional for you to get in touch with yourself. And I think during that time, I was really on my own kind of spiritual journey. And then I decided to go there. And it was such beautiful energy. All the other women, I met like women from all different places who traveled in their own ways from Germany and Brazil, and other women from the US, France, a bunch of different places. And at one point, there was one girl, I think she was 20 years old from Germany, and she had like long dreadlocks, and she was absolutely beautiful. And I remember she got lice at one point, and because she had dreadlocks, it was kind of hard to get lice out of her hair. And so we would like spend time every day, like each of us like picking lice out of her hair. I clearly remember with like tweezers. I don't even have kids and I've been a nanny for so long and never had to do it, but it was with another adult. And
Oh my
she tried a
gosh.
bunch of different shampoos and things and like it just wasn't coming out. And she really didn't want to shave her dreadlocks because that would have been the only way to get it out. And I had told her, if you shave your head, I'll do it with you. And I had really wanted to for some time, but I just had never gotten around to doing it. And So one day, I think I was at the beach with friends, and we came back to the house, the ashram we were staying at, and she was bald. And she looked so radiant and so beautiful. And I was just like, "You look amazing." And she's like, "Now it's your turn," jokingly. And I don't think there was ever any like really pressure for me to do it, but I just felt so strongly like, okay, like I want to do this too. So I went. There was a shaman that was staying with us. He was the only one with a razor, like a buzzer. And I went down to his room and I asked for it. And it had one setting, which was like the shortest it could possibly go. And we went into the bathroom and they like all came with me for moral support. And one of them recorded it. So I have it on video. But my hair was like super long. And for those of you who don't know me, I have really big curly hair. And I sat in the bathroom in front of the mirror and took the razor and shaved my entire head and was fully bald for the rest of my travels and for like a solid year until it, eventually grew back in. But yeah, that's my favorite memory from my travels.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I am really impressed. I would be way too scared to do that, but women supporting women, we are here for that.
This is like so cool on so many levels. Like, first of all, how did you find this place that you were going to? Did you just like show up and then you're like, "Oh, that sounds nice," or did you seek this place out and that's just where you ended up?
Yeah, no, I was just looking. So there's a few websites that I use to volunteer while I'm traveling to kind of keep it cheaper. Um, and basically, it's like a work exchange. So you work in exchange for your stay. And I had found this particular one on Workaway, which is one of the sites that you can use. Workaway and World Packers are like the two main ones that I use. And I don't even know how I'd found out about Workaway, but I was kind of planning for this trip, seeing what I could do, and I was just seeing what workaway opportunities were out there, like anywhere in the world. And I somehow came across this one and I instantly loved it. And I think I'd gotten on one or two calls with like this, it was a Portuguese woman who kind of ran the whole ashram. And I'd gotten on one or two calls with her. We discussed like what the duties were, what it would look like, the time there, everything. And I agreed to a month. And yeah, and that was it. And there was no really like formal contract or anything, and I kind of look back at it like I agreed to this thing, but I could have really showed up and it could have been like nothing. Like I didn't know if it was real. And that's happened to other friends who have done volunteer experiences where they're like, yeah, it just kind of fell through and I was already in the country and it just fell through. So I'm super grateful and super lucky that that has never happened to me. But yeah, I just happened upon it on Workaway, and we had a few calls, it worked out great, and that's where I ended up.
Wow. Talk about a leap of faith. My gosh. You go.
Fully a leap of faith because it was a work away. I had never been to India, and of course I chose somewhere like further south of India, so it's less chaotic, less intense because I was aware enough to know that like I'm doing this for the first time. Let me not go to New Delhi or Mumbai. Like let's do something a little bit calmer. So I did the south, which was a bit more chill and relaxed than other parts of India. Um, and yeah, I fully like I was living with a partner at the time. We broke up because they didn't want to do long distance and I didn't know how long I was going to be gone for. I fully left the apartment I was living in and like packed up everything and put it into storage, used the deposit that I got back as part of my travels. Like I literally burned down my life, I say, and just like went for it. And here we are 4 years later, still going. So it worked out.
That's beautiful. Just how you said that too. That's amazing. Good for you. That's incredible.
Thank you.
I love that story, but do you have any, like, other travel stories that stick out to you from your travels so far?
Yeah, absolutely. There's honestly been so much that has happened, and I think because I travel in a fairly spontaneous, like, let's go with the flow and see what happens kind of way, it kind of allows and opens me up to a lot of opportunities for awesome things to happen and spontaneity. So I think Southeast Asia was one of the times where I had the most kind of adventures and spontaneity. One of my favorites is a love story, so I'll share.
It's perfect for Valentine's Day.
Let me pull my box of tissues over real quick.
Yes, okay, awesome. So, I was in Thailand, and I was getting to Chiang Mai in Thailand, and I was deciding on what hostel to stay in, and I think that's kind of like one of my favorite parts about this is that you just make a decision and you don't even know that it's going to have you end up in a different place, like meeting certain people. But anyway, I remember being in India looking at two different hostels on Hostel World in Chiang Mai, and I was like, oh, they both seem really awesome. And I went with one of them. It was called DJ Backpackers. And I got there and I met a bunch of people. We were having a great time hanging out by the pool, going on adventures to waterfalls, all the things. And then one day, this guy walked in and he was Italian, very pretty, with like green eyes, the Italian accent, whole thing. I was like, oh, I want that one. He literally like, yes, please, I will take that one. But I didn't really like make any moves. I just kind of like put myself in the same space and we were hanging out with a group and I would like, we would go out to bars and I would like talk to him. And then one night we all went out to a bar and we walked back and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to leave." And he was like, "Oh, I'll walk you back." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine. Thank you." So he walked me back and I think it was like nighttime, so it was getting chillier and he gave me his jacket. And I still have that jacket to this day, um, fully, and we'll have it forever. But anyway, so that night we were walking back and he kissed me and then that like sparked a whole 2-week romance where we went up to Pai in Thailand. And if anyone knows Pai in Thailand, it's like rice paddy fields and like this little town in the mountains, and it's so cute. So we were just having a full little romance up there and like riding bikes together, going to waterfalls, like walking around the markets at night together, just had a lovely time. And then we were coming to the end of our 2 weeks in Pai, and he was going to Australia next and I was going to Laos. And so it's like you kind of know you're going to part ways and it's really sad. But then he asked me, he's like, "I'm going to go to Vietnam before I go to Australia. Do you want to travel Vietnam with me?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that." And so then we separated for 2 weeks because I had already committed to volunteering at this dog shelter in Thailand, in Pai. So I went there for 2 weeks and he went to a monastery. And we didn't really talk for the 2 weeks because he wasn't allowed to have his phone. But then towards the end of the 2 weeks, he texted me and he had done like all of the planning, like found an Airbnb for us to stay in, all of these things. And we met back up in Vietnam like 2 weeks after that, and then spent was supposed to be 2 weeks traveling Vietnam, turned into a month of traveling Vietnam, literally from Ho Chi Minh. I'm pretty sure Ho Chi Minh is the south of Vietnam, all the way up to the north, and for a whole month together, like via motorbike. So we would rent motorbikes in different cities along the way, and like he would drive, and we would just drive like the most beautiful scenic routes. And I'm vegetarian, and he was vegetarian slash vegan. And so we would find like cute little vegetarian vegan places to go to, try different cafes. And it was just like a really beautiful and magical month. And yeah, that's the kind of little romance that I had. I was deeply heartbroken by the end of it, but that's just a part of how it goes. Because I mean, eventually you part ways. He headed to Australia and I headed off to Laos, and we've stayed in contact ever since. That was years ago, and we haven't seen each other since because he lives in Australia still and the restrictions were really harsh and he couldn't leave, and I've never been to Australia. So it's just never really worked out for us to see each other again. But we're still very good friends. And, that's kind of the most you can hope for at the end of something like that.
That is like better than any Hallmark movie, any other love story. I hope you both are still single because this just sounds phenomenal, and like you guys need to get back together and go to Australia or somewhere, find a way to see each other again because this just sounds like the most beautiful love story.
When we do talk, we say, like, he's a bit older than me. So when we do talk, I'll say, like, "Oh, when I'm this age and you're this age, if neither of us are married, we'll get married." And he's like an incredible cook. Like, we would, when we were backpacking, like, he would get ingredients to make pancakes in the morning to like make me breakfast and stuff. And he is an excellent chef. So he'd be like, "Yeah, like if we get married, like we'll have a house in Italy and I'll cook all the time." And I'm like, "Sold. I'm done." Like, where do I sign up? So I think our agreement was like once I'm 30 and he's like, I don't know, 36 or 37, we'll get married. So we'll see if that ends up happening. I'll keep you updated.
Yeah, please do. We're devoted to this love story now.
I'm so invested. I ship this so much. Like, do people even say that anymore? I heard it on a TV show recently, but it was an old TV show, so I don't know. Do kids say that? Anyways, who cares? But oh my God, I'm getting so many Eat, Pray, Love vibes also. Like, you're living it.
Thank you. That was totally my goal, honestly. Like, because Eat, Pray, Love is an absolute classic. The book, the movie, all of it. And before I left for this trip, I was like, we're just gonna eat, pray, love the hell out of this adventure and see what happens. And I've just been like, that's my motto ever since. Like, we're just gonna eat, pray, love it, or like do it for the plot. Like, if anything, like this will probably end in heartbreak, but we're gonna do it for the plot and see what happens.
Oh my gosh. I'm like inspired because this is something like in my own life that I'm just like, okay, you got to realize your dreams, make them happen. Like life is short. It's just so cool to hear you talk about how you had a plan of like what you kind of wanted your life to look like in terms of like traveling, including spontaneity, but like you're making it
Yeah.
happen. And that, I think that's just awesome. It's so cool. Do you have other stories? Because I'm like so invested now.
And now a quick word from our sponsor. Newsly is an all-in-one audio super app for iOS and Android. It picks up the most trending articles on the web on topics you choose at any given moment and reads them to you in a natural human voice. The entire web becomes listenable for the first time, all in one place. Browse articles from topics you choose and start playing. Stop scrolling and start listening. You can follow any topic as specific as you like, from sports, tech, business, science, Bitcoin, or even the Kardashians. It will find you the latest articles and read them to you aloud. And the best part, they have podcasts. Explore trending podcasts from over 80 countries. You can even find us there. I started using it as my default podcast app. They even have a digital radio. Download and use Newsly for free now at www.newsly.me or from the link in the description and use promo code WIVES. That's WIVES. And you can get a 1-month free premium subscription. You can find all this information in our description from this episode. And now back to our episode.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, there's always been, of course, the like occasional romances while I was traveling. Like, I love to use Bumble and Tinder, and it's a great way of like meeting locals. So recently when I was in Italy, like I had a guy take me out on his boat, and that was super fun. And I don't know, just like you have your Lizzie McGuire moment, like driving on the back of a motorbike like through Lisbon and different things like that. But I think one of my favorites was on this most recent trip. I was in Florence, Italy, at this beautiful hostel. It's called Bigelow Hostel. It's a little bit outside of Florence, but I think if you stay anywhere in Florence, it's worth it, even though it's a little bit outside the city, because it's an old monastery that was converted into a hostel, and it sits at the top of this hill, and it overlooks the whole city of Florence. It's so gorgeous, and you can see the sunset over the city. And like I think on Wednesdays it's like $7 for a glass of wine, and they do pasta nights. So like everyone at the hostel sits on this big long table outside and eats like homemade pasta made by the man who runs the hostel. It's a beautiful magical place. And while I was there, I met two guys from Germany who were traveling like for a month together through Italy, and we became really good friends. And then one of them I kind of had like a thing with for a little bit. He was very cute, lovely guy. And I was after that traveling. We'd like stayed in touch, and I was traveling through the Netherlands, and I was close to Germany. And I was just like, "Hey, I'm in Holland. Where are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm in, I think he was in somewhere in France." But he's like, "Oh, I get back on this day." And I'm like, "Oh, well, I leave the Netherlands on that day," like with a side eye emoji, like because he had said like, "Oh, if you're ever in Germany." And I didn't want to be like, "Hi, can I come stay with you?" But I'm also very I'm also very upfront, and I'm like, "Okay, so why not?" So he's like, "Oh, I'll be back on this day." And I was like, "Cool, see you there." And he's like, "This is my address." And so I basically just kind of showed up, and he's like, "You can stay as long as you want, da da da." And we had like a lovely time. I met a bunch of his friends. We went to like a concert because he had an extra ticket. A friend of his couldn't go. So we went to a concert. It was like some German rapper. I had no idea what they were saying, but I was in my first mosh pit. So much fun. Like, just had a great time. He lived in Cologne, and then I went about my adventures. I think I went to Portugal and Croatia and stuff after. And he was like, "Oh, my birthday's November, da 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 da. You should come back. Like, I'm gonna have a big party, all this stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, maybe I can try." So I did. I came back. Like, I took several buses, like hours. I think like 24 hours worth of buses to get back to Cologne, so that I could be there for his birthday. And then I spent like almost 2 weeks there the second time, and I became really good friends with one of his good friends. Like, her and I think, now talk more than him and I do, and then her and I, like, FaceTime the other day, and he had a big party with all of his friends, and I got to meet a bunch of people. Like, I think I was the only non-German there, but they were all so lovely, and they all speak really great English, so it was totally fine. And it was during the time of a lot of the Christmas markets too, because it was like beginning of December-ish. So we went to like a bunch of different Christmas markets, and I got to have a very like authentic German experience because I was hanging out with all of these Germans. And him and I have just like are still really great friends. He's traveling Indonesia right now and have stayed in touch so much. But it's one of my favorite memories because we randomly met in a hostel in Florence, and then I ended up visiting him twice, meeting all of his friends, like do having all of these adventures. And it all just feels, that's why I say I love the spontaneity and like coincidental aspect of it, because it's just by chance that we met, and now I have a great friend and even more friends from meeting him.
That's amazing.
I love that, connecting the world. I have two thoughts. First, I'm married, so I can't say sign me up to like all of that story, but you did say $7 wine in there, and please sign me up for like 8 of those. Um and number two, I have a question. If you had to estimate, like from all your travels so far, how many countries would you say you like have friends in at this point? If that's even possible to count.
I think I've done a bit over 20 countries so far in life. So it's not even like an insane amount, but I'm pretty sure I have friends like not everywhere, but like every country that I've been to, I can name like people that I know. And it's really fun because when I traveled Southeast Asia, I met a lot of people from Europe, and then when I went to Europe, I was able to, like, reconnect with them and see them, and then when I was teaching English in Spain, like, I made a lot of friends there, so going back to Spain felt so like home because I was re-seeing friends and, like, re-meeting up with old people, and it always feels really good when you're able to stay connected with people and then go back and see them again. So that's I have a lot of friends in different places, and, it makes travel, like, that much better when you are able to reconnect and be like, "Oh, hey, like, I'm here, where are you?" And you're able to meet up again even if it's years later.
I love that. I'm ready to leave my job and go put myself out there. I am very type A. I have to have my itinerary all laid out, everything planned to the T, but I think I need to let go a little and just see what life has to throw at me. You have definitely inspired me. I don't know about you, Regan, but I'm feeling it's inspired to let go a little bit and loosen up.
I think I started off that way though, very type A as well, um, and I, like, tried to have a lot of things planned, but I realized as someone who was traveling long term at the time, I think it was different because I had just saved up a bunch of money and I was just going. So there wasn't really like work that I had to do. Now it's a little bit different because I have clients that I have deadlines for. And so I need a little bit more structure and like good Wi Fi and things. Um, but I think at first I wanted to be very type A and I was trying to be. But I think after a while, the travel like fluidity kind of takes over and you learn how to let yourself just go with it. Maybe not as intensely as I have, but everyone has their own level, and that can be part of the learning that comes along with traveling, is like maybe I need to learn how to let go a little bit and see what happens and like trust that it's all going to be fine. And it's one of the many lessons you can learn from traveling.
Awesome. Well, let's chat. I'm very interested.
Of course. Whatever you wanna know, let me know. I'm so happy to help.
Awesome. Well, Allie, do you have anything else before we wrap up?
I was going to say, thank you so much for your time. We've loved your podcast and are so stoked that you came on and shared your great stories with all of our listeners. And we hope that they are feeling inspired. So thank you again, Dianni.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me. I had a great time and I love recounting these stories because sometimes you forget about these things. And so bringing them up and sharing them with new people always makes me so happy. So thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Wanderlusting Lives podcast. Come escape with us again every other Tuesday for Travel Tuesdays and every other Wednesday for Wildcard Wednesdays.
Don't forget to give us a subscribe and a follow on all of our social media and wherever you listen to your podcasts. And until next time, wander on!